let's talk about Gambit's lobotomy.
Yes, it seems whenever the Ragin' Cajun is brought up, hordes of fans can't help but scream, "He's more powerful than you think, actually!" Which is true. Gambit got a lobotomy to purposefully lower his power levels, and ever since that was revealed, fans have been desperate to know how powerful he could have been. Which is a little funny because it was answered in 1999. Yeah, the actual story of Gambit's lobotomy, as well as the true scope of his powers, tends to get oversimplified. Thanks in no small part to idiots on TikTok diluting the whole thing down to less than a minute long engagement bait.
You know that phrase, with great power comes great responsibility? Well, Gambit took that a different way.
Just because I helped raise the beast does not mean I have no interest in slaying it. After all, what man would not want to conquer their sins made manifest? Anyways, you know that old phrase, with great power comes great responsibility? Well, Gambit heard that and went the other way. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of Remy's Snip Snip Brain Time, let's take a moment to remember where exactly this man came from. He was born to unknown parents, or at least unknown to him, in New Orleans, Louisiana, already possessing the physical mutation of red eyes. This earned him the name Le Diable Blanc, aka the White Devil, and the attention of a man named the Antiquary. The leader of a radical offshoot of the Thieves Guild, the Antiquary was so fascinated by Remy that he ordered him stolen from the hospital and added to his collection, which means slaves. The specifics of the situation are never really clear, but we know it's not great. In fact, it's bad enough that the leader of the guild, Jean-Luc Lebeau, ends up stealing the child back and arranges for him to be raised in yet another subsidiary called Fagin's Mob. So Remy spends his childhood as a young orphan being taught in the ways of pickpocketing by a man named Fagin, and yeah, that's the plot of Oliver Twist. This lasts until he's 10 years old, when he sees a young girl in danger. Already having that superhero dog in him, he jumps in to save her, only to immediately learn that was not necessary. Because this is Belladonna Boudreaux, princess of the Assassin's Guild. Yes, there's a Thieves Guild and an Assassin's Guild. They've been at war for thousands of years? Thousands. Not sure the math works out on that one, but okay. Both guilds swear fealty to the benefactress, also known as Chandra of the Floating Spires. What are the Floating Spires? I truly could not tell you. Not a lot is known about Chandra, like she's a mutant, and she's old, though probably not thousands of years old, and her main defining trait is boredom. And that leads her to do things like make a deal with both guilds where, in exchange for a portion of their bounty, she gives the thieves an elixir for eternal life and assassins superpowers. How can she do that? I have no idea, but Bella's powers are shooty hand blasts. Anyways, Remy and Bella hit it off immediately. Then, just a few days later, the greatest thief in New Orleans is pickpocketed by an orphan and is so impressed he adopts him on the spot. In surely unrelated news, Jean-Luc makes a deal with Marius, Belladonna's father, to officially end the war through the marriage of their two children. And look, does getting adopted solely to serve as a pawn in a political alliance suck? Yeah, probably, but the Lebeau clan does genuinely become Remy's family. He gets particularly close with Jean-Luc's biological son, Henry, and his wife, Mercy, as well as his two cousins, Etienne and Emile. When he's 12, he and Emile steal a military jet, only to realize that they don't know how to fly or land, so their only option is to eject. A few years later, he and Etienne have a structurally similar experience, but with far more tragedy. This occurs during Etienne's thief bar mitzvah, which they call the tilling. It's how you become a full member of the guild, and basically, you just have to pull off a heist by yourself. A chaperone goes with you to make sure you can't cheat, but they can't help. Henry was Remy's chaperone, and now Remy is going to be Etienne's. Only the person Etienne was sent to steal from is Chandra, which is what we call bureaucratic mismanagement. No, but seriously, I think the implication is that Chandra is considering hiring some goons and finangles thieves to try and steal from her to test them out. She's not really good at the whole caring about others thing, so when the kids are captured, she just lets the goons take them. Though, to her credit, she does seem a little confused as to why one of them is Gambit. More on that in a bit. Anyways, the goons take the kids to a supervillain named the Pig to be trained as slaves. Essentially, this place is Taskmaster's Henchman Academy, but with less free will, and the only entertainment the kids are allowed is playing cards. Hey, anyways, did I mention that Gambit's mutant powers have kicked in? He can't quite control them yet, and he's hesitant to use them, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Which means now is probably a good time to break down what exactly they are. There's been a few different explanations over the years, but the one most of what we're going to be talking about deals with is biokinetic energy. It means that Remy is a balloon boy. Don't get me wrong, he's got bones and blood and other things I'm sure people have, but somewhere in there is a current of pure energy that he can send into an object by touching it. This sets off a molecular chain reaction that culminates in a boom. Or, to put it simply,
thing Gambit does is turn shit into bombs!
he picks up one of the cards to fight off the pig, and the rest is history. This is important because earlier he mentioned that he never really cared for playing cards, which means he became a gambler to stay on theme. Oh, also Etienne died. RIP. And if you think that's tragic, then strap in, because Remy's powers continue to grow. Though that doesn't stop him from showboating to get laid. But wait, what about Belladonna? Yeah, listen, Remy's not exactly a great dude, which is how we get to Genevieve. She's Remy's mark for his tilling, which for some reason happens when he's 17. Fabian Nicieza wrote both this and the Etienne story, but this one came out like 5 years earlier, and I guess at some point he decided that he liked the thief mitzvah better. But it's a ceremonial rite. Remy is tasked to steal a specific object. Henry is the chaperone. It is clearly supposed to be the same thing. Maybe they do it twice. It does not matter. What's important is that Remy has ample opportunity to pull off this heist with absolutely no problem. Which would be great, except he's purposely drawing it out until he accomplishes a specific side quest, being invited into her boudoir. So he's pretending to fall in love with this woman, but unfortunately does such a good job that he tricks Sabretooth, who is after the same artifact, which results in a classic supervillain twofer where Remy is forced to pick between saving Genevieve or Henry. Though, given that he doesn't actually care about this woman at all, the choice is not that hard. Psst, Remy, you're supposed to save both of them. That's the trick. No, but seriously, this is an interesting subversion of the usual fridging trope because it's not meant to make us feel bad for Remy. It's meant to show how shitty he is. The main takeaway is that he shouldn't be playing with people's hearts and lives this callously. Which is a good lesson, but unfortunate timing because he's about to be in an arranged marriage. Now, again, Remy does care about Bella, but it's kind of like when you're about to take out the trash and then someone asks you to, so you don't really feel like doing it anymore. Because remember, they are not Romeo and Juliet. This is a parent-sponsored relationship. Though not sibling-sponsored. Bella's older brother, Julian, waits till right after the vows to give Remy his out by challenging him to a duel. Remy obliges and wins, but still can't control his power. So what should have been a non-lethal blow blows up. The assassins originally want to kill him in return, because if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks vaguely assassinatable. But Bella manages to talk them down to a nice, calm exile. Remy will no longer be affiliated with the Thieves Guild and will never return to New Orleans. Though notably, there's nothing to stop her from going with him. Except, of course, for the fact he doesn't want her to. As he says, "Since I was a pup, the only thing I ever wanted was you for my wife. But when the marriage was arranged, we no longer had a choice. Don't you see, leaving you to live your own life was the only way I had of making a choice that was my own." So Remy leaves on his own, officially retiring the LeBeau name and donning a new one, Gambit. And make no mistake, Gambit is a persona. Remy LeBeau is not the carefree, swashbuckling, too-cool-for-school guy that he's often boiled down to. That's a mask that he wears to hide his true personality, a sentient ball of angst. There are a lot of good lines about Gambit's dichotomy, but I think this one sums it up the best. The facade evaporates and I see him for what he truly is. A young man feeling older than his years, a good man swimming in bad luck, a man who cares too much, but is always forced to act as if he doesn't care at all. The entire Gambit image is an act. Specifically, it's him acting like his father. Yeah, we don't get to see a ton of Jean-Luc in his prime, but it's not hard to tell where Remy gets his moves. He's got the same trench coat, the same bow staff, even the same weird ponytail. But for as reckless as he acts, Remy is a very anxious individual, and as he's growing more powerful by the day, he starts to worry about losing control. After all, turning the wrong thing into a bomb is a good way to lose friends, or at least make it hard to find all the pieces. So he decides to take drastic measures. Unfortunately, the only person covered by super criminal insurance is Mr. Sinister. Luckily, he has a $0 copay. Unluckily, that does not cover blood debts. In return for the surgery, Mr. Sinister tasks him with gathering a bunch of super-powered people for reasons. I go into this more in depth in a different video, but personally, I feel like Gambit probably assumed he was gonna kill these people, or at least horribly experiment on them, which helps explain why instead of actually contacting any of the criminal networks Sinister is allegedly recruiting him for, he enlists people like Sabretooth. It also explains why he feels so guilty later on about including Greycrow. But Sinister does not kill these dudes, he actually gets them to kill a whole bunch of other people, which Gambit had no idea about. To quote Sinister's own journal, "Too late, LeBeau realized the true intent of the mission and attempted to prevent the massacre. Unable to stop the carnage, he saved what lives he could and fled before the X-Men arrived." So, guilty of stupidity, innocent of murder. you could say. Now, Gambit wouldn't actually meet the X-Men until one day, while he was out stealing some paintings, he met a young girl running away from a supervillain. He helps her out, takes her under his wing, and teaches her how to redistribute wealth up and down the coast. And yes, that girl was Storm. She was a child for reasons we do not have time right now, but she eventually gets back to normal and Gambit officially joins the team. He doesn't hear the name LeBeau again until Bishop arrives from the future. He recognizes Gambit as the man called the Witness, the great traitor of the X-Men who got them all killed. The X-Men's response to this is to have a picnic. I love comics. I particularly love the Witness. That's my favorite superpower for alternate Gambit, but unfortunately, he plays a hilariously small role in this story. Anyways, guess who crashes the picnic? Yes, Belladonna is back, and this is actually the first time that the X-Men meet the guilds, as they have to go down to Louisiana to help stop an alien invasion. In the fight, Belladonna sacrifices herself to save Psylocke. Or at least that's what we thought. A little bit later, Gambit learns that the assassins have managed to keep her just barely alive and never told him because, well, they just still don't really like him. So he breaks the guild's sacred pact with Chandra and steals the elixir of life, managing to fully revive her. So they live happily ever after, right? No, Rogue touched her. Okay, to be fair, Bella touched Rogue. I mean, her glove was off because she was actively considering touching her, but still technically not her fault. She absorbs all of Bella's memories and presumably her power. Like, she keeps Chandra's hand blast, but never does this astral projection thing again. And I've always thought, much like Gambit being the only mutant on the Thieves Guild, Belladonna was meant to be the only true mutant on the Assassins. And like with Captain Marvel, Rogue absorbed her so completely that she got the powers too. Except Rogue doesn't astral project either, so who knows? Since Bella doesn't have her memories, she and Gambit can't be together. But since Rogue does have her memories, she and Gambit can't be together. It's a bit of an ominous thing to have hanging over a relationship. Do I really love you, or just remember falling in love with you as a child? Do you really love me, or just the part that reminds you of your first love because I literally absorbed her personality? There's a moment where Gambit starts to put together what happened, and he decides to test Rogue by bringing up a breakfast recipe that he got from an old friend. Rogue responds by asking if he saved the chocolate goop at the bottom because it's her favorite, when clearly it's actually Bella's. And this proves just how much of Bella and Gambit's relationship was puppy love, because I mean, honestly, what grown adult would eat this for breakfast? But, of course, Rogue and Gambit do grow closer and closer, and it becomes impossible to deny their connection. So when they find themselves in Antarctica, mysteriously without their powers, they choose to finally consummate their relationship. So they live happily ever after. No, Gambit got a lot of people killed. Yeah, remember that from earlier? It didn't seem to matter? Well, now it matters a whole lot. Magneto puts Gambit on trial, while wearing this outfit, because no excuse not to slay the day away, and Gambit is forced to confess his role in the Mutant Massacre, which, remember, was creating a team for an undisclosed purpose, fighting against them the moment that purpose was disclosed, and then working to save as many lives as he could while grossly injured. The X-Men leave him in Antarctica to die. Yeah, they try to couch this in later comics, saying that they searched for him and that the only reason Rogue abandoned him in the first place is because she absorbed his self-loathing. But yeah, no, they leave him to die, and he certainly would have too, if not for some help. He is rescued by a man named Nusun, or at least Nusun sends some people to rescue him, but not exactly for free. He wants Gambit to steal a terraforming device for him from the High Evolutionary, and since a life debt went so well for him last time, Gambit agrees. Surprise, surprise, it doesn't end there. Gambit returns to New York and rejoins the X-Men, though he chooses to live in the boathouse instead of the mansion. Understandable, really. He even works things out with Rogue. Kinda. But Nusun continues to contact him through a go-between named Jacob Gavin Jr., aka Courier. At first, he's only asked to do obviously good things, like keeping Celestial Tech out of the CIA's vaguely super-villainous hands. But eventually, to test his loyalty, they ask him to steal from the X-Men's longtime ally, Moira McTaggart. Gambit feels a bit uneasy about this, not just because it means having to lie to his friends again, but because Moira is a geneticist, which means, in order to butter her up, he has to agree to let her run some tests. This reveals that Gambit has come back with a few more powers than he left with. As she says, his body has become a kettle stew of shifting biospectrum energy, which is a fancy way to say Mary Purcell. Yeah, it turns out Magneto was keeping this strange green energy in his base right before the X-Men blew it up, and unbeknownst to him, that was a woman. Her name's Mary, and she merges with Gambit so he doesn't starve right around the time he's going full rat. And remember what I said about him being a balloon boy? Well, it turns out if you cram even more energy into him, you get some neat upgrades, like the ability to delay his charges for comedic effect, and of course being able to take a bone dagger straight to the the chest. Yeah, that one's a little hard to explain to the crew, so he comes clean, which prompts the X-Men to ask what Gambit never really thought was relevant: what does Mary want? Turns out, a child, at least in the Steven Universe way. She reveals that there are tons of non-corporeal mutants, just like herself, that exist solely on the electromagnetic spectrum. Her goal is to merge with Gambit so completely that they create a new being who is the perfect synergy of physical and bioelectric life. Now, on a serious note, there's a lot of charged language in this story, as it is definitely interested in exploring Gambit being the one whose body is being taken advantage of. But it's obviously not a one-to-one, because Gambit does feel bad for her. He wants to help, but ends up killing her instead. Yeah, that's the bad part of being a gambler. Sometimes you lose, which is important to keep in mind as we turn back to New Sun. Like every good employer, he does his research. He hires a woman named Fontanelle, a mutant therapist with the power to insert herself into her patient's dreams, to learn all she can about Gambit. She discovers two main things. One, she and him may have something pretty major in common. More on that in a moment. And number two, a lot of people remember meeting Gambit before they should. Pontamati, the guild's healer and Gambit's mother figure, remembers him saving her from a lynching when she was a child. Kondra's lackey, the tithe collector, remembers seeing him in late 19th century London. And remember, even Kondra herself seemed to recognize him when they met. All of this points to the obvious conclusion: Gambit went back in time. So, Gambit goes back in time. It really is that closed of a loop. Jean-Luc calls him up and is like, hey, I know you were exactly this age when I met you as a boy, so you should probably get on that. They tell him he helped save the guild from Kondra's wrath and paved the way for Jean-Luc to be a better patriarch than his own father. How exactly? No one remembers. Convenient. With a little help from his friends, Gambit sneaks into Doom's castle, he was away at the moment, and hops into a one-way time machine. He even makes sure to grab Courier, cause, well, he was there. They arrive in 1893 to find a very different, overall shittier guild waiting for them. Headed by Gambit's granddaddy, Jacques, they've only had a pact with Kondra for a few years and are already on the outs. It seems she asked them to steal this rare jewel called the Momentary Princess that doubles as a time anomaly. It only appears for a few seconds every 30 years and is rumored to give whoever wields it visions of their future. And past, but that's not as interesting. Jacques decides to delegate this to his 12-year-old son. One more disastrous thief mitzvah later, the pact is broken and Jean-Luc, along with Etienne's father Belize, is taken captive. Cause what's a time travel story without some irony? The guild is desperately searching for any other way to show Kondra her future. Gambit tracks them to the abandoned home of Nathaniel Essex, an eccentric scientist that used to live in London. The best they could scrounge up were some notes on the resting place of a being named Apocalypse. Kondra does not like when you bring up Apocalypse. They're the same type of immortal mutant called an external, only Apocalypse is more prone to napping. Given that they live by Highlander-esque there can only be one rules, Kondra is always worried about the day he wakes up. Seeing his chance, Gambit offers to track down Essex and learn more about Apocalypse in return for the kid's release and reinstatement of the pact. Not yet understanding this random dude is on their side, the guild says they can do the same thing, but faster. Kondra decides to stick to the felons that she knows, but having absolutely zero faith in them, Gambit goes ahead and kidnaps his father anyway. But of course, they don't know that Gambit is playing with a rigged deck. He knows that Essex is Mr. Sinister, and that he's currently in New York going by the name of Dr. Milbury. This is before Sinister had really cracked cloning, so he was doing his gene experiments the old-fashioned way, paying a woman to have very specific sex and then buying her children. Yeah, Sinister's fucked. His partner in crime, also kind of fucked, is Amanda Mueller, who tries to play off all of the pregnancies as miscarriages. Eventually, people catch on and call her the Black Womb, claiming that she's a serial killer, which is only technically not true. Oh, also she's Fontanelle's mother. More on that in a bit. To Gambit's surprise, young Jean-Luc isn't that jazzed about the pact being restored. Just like Remy in the present, it seems this version of Jean-Luc is a reformer. He finds all of the guild's traditions to be a bit backwards and, frankly, cultish. He is correct. Not only does this version of the guild spend a lot more time doing weird religious rituals, but they don't even keep what they steal, instead choosing to live in poverty. Seeing that we know Gambit is unimaginably wealthy, I'd imagine this is the first thing Jean-Luc changed. But the real stark difference is that the 1800s guild stole only in search of truth about the Old Kingdom, which was a place that was very old and nice. I'll be honest, the specifics are not super clear, but that's because even the thieves don't really know a lot about it. The antiquary tried to learn as much as he could, but he's creepy and no one likes to talk to him. The important bit is that it's supposed to be heaven on earth, and the Thieves Guild have been trying to bring it back for thousands of years. But the prophecy says that can't happen until the guilds are united by a man with red eyes. Yeah, that's right. Le Diable Blanc isn't just a mean nickname. It's a mean nickname for the Messiah. That's the real reason the Antiquary was so interested in Remy, and it's why Jean-Luc adopted him the second he hit it off with Belladonna. And listen, as far as chosen ones go, you could do worse than Gambit. I mean, you could also do better, but... For the record, his grand plan to have a meeting with Milbury is convincing Courier to shapeshift into a woman and book an appointment. They tell Jean-Luc that Courier is just a really talented actor, which is objectively hilarious. Jean-Luc, by the way, having a ball. He really seems to like Gambit. And just like Remy modeled himself on his father, it seems that his father may have modeled himself on him. But it's not enough. When tasked with choosing between the mysterious stranger and his family, Jean-Luc defaults to loyalty. This is, all things considered, a good decision. See, like Moira, Sinister is a geneticist, which means to book a meeting with him, you have to be open to light experimentation. Unlike Moira, he's not above splicing any interesting bits into himself. This is genuinely how Sinister gained his shape-shifting abilities. It's also how Courier became Goop. In what is starting to become a habit, Gambit strikes a deal with him and negotiates Courier's resolidification. Only since Sinister met him as a woman, he assumes that's his default form. So now it is, which is honestly kind of fascinating, but we do not have time. Because while all this was going on, the guild managed to actually track down the wild goose, stumbling upon Apocalypse's chamber, which, wouldn't you know it, is chock full of info on the Old Kingdom. Or the fairly recent kingdom, as far as Apokylaki is concerned. Much to Jean-Luc's horror, the guild uses this information to boost Condra's power, allegedly giving her the ability to fold time and space through magic the way Apocalypse does through science. And if you're asking yourself, wait, Apocalypse could teleport using science, then yeah, apparently he can. Using giant machines like this weird bullet that Gambit, Courier, and Sinister arrive in right on cue. Gambit puts a stop to the ritual while Sinister decides to take some more of those tasty genes, which is again why he is immortal. For those following along at home, yeah, it seems basically everything about Sinister is Gambit's fault, which means I guess he's kind of to blame for the massacre after all. Huh. But wait, they changed history, right? The guild learned the secrets of the Old Kingdom a century earlier, and it's not like that info can just be erased from their... Oh, right. Yeah, not only does Gambit get a lobotomy, the entire Thieves Guild does. Sinister, doing some top-tier comic book science, steals their memories and plants them deep into the recesses of Gambit's mind. In doing so, he notices some signs of previous work. Originally, Gambit refuses to have the lobotomy reversed. And then he realizes that he doesn't have a way to get home. So, what's the worst that could happen? Okay, listen, I understand that was a long preamble just to get to what I mentioned in the beginning, but remember, the whole point was context, right? I'm still a little mad at the parts I had to cut. We didn't even talk about how the witness was the one sending the momentary princess back in time. But don't worry, I'm going to reward you all for your patience by providing a laundry list of new abilities Gambit possesses at full power, made possible because the moment he gets back, everyone and their mother tries to kill him. First, thanks to a soft gauze wrap of bioelectricity around him, he can now touch Rogue. However, makeup sex is still off the table, because he can't get too excited, since the same ambient energy can unconsciously charge the air around him based on mood. He can also now charge things instantly, whereas the bigger the object, the more time it used to take. In addition, he can charge things without touching them, and can even affect organic material, which means, yes, you're doing the math right, he can blow up anybody with a thought. His charges also burn now. They're not fire or anything, it's pure slap a chicken rules, but they're hot enough to affect even Colossus in his armored form. And that's still not all. He's also faster, stronger, and in a state of perpetual biokinetic hyperactivity, which means using his powers not only rejuvenates him, but heals him, to the point that he's able to do the old Mary Purcell trick for real, turning any unwanted protrusion into the same fission arc that now permeates his internal systems. Which means, yes, he's not even limited to explosions. He stops Bullseye from being able to fire a bullet, and charges a whole building on a molecule-by-molecule level. That means, instead of letting the unstable chain reaction take over, he meticulously chooses which molecules to charge so that everything just turns to dust. Oh, yeah, and he can time travel. That little maneuver was pulled off by Mr. Sinister splicing genetic memory engrams into his head and performing a surgical procedure that created the infinite potential within him to become, for the briefest moment in time, a pure conduit of kinetic energy. But rather than revel in this power, Gambit seems to hate it. Because remember, at his core, he's just a sad little dude, and he can feel all of the things that make life worth living slipping away. As he says, what's the good in being home, seeing your loved ones if you can't be near them, touch them without the fear of blowing them up? And I'm tired, Carl. I mean, I'm really tired. Life tired. Jesus! Or Remy, whichever the real one is. But it's not all doom and gloom. He's able to make amends with Rogue and even gets closure with Belladonna. Turns out the only people not actually hired to kill him were the Assassin's Guild. That was a lie that Bella, having slowly regained all her memories, concocted to get close to him. When they're stuck in the cave-in together, we get a truly beautiful scene that shows just how raw of a deal she got in all of this. As she says, "I thought I hated him, wanted to hate him, I died, I lived again, had my memories stolen, worked to get them back, lost my brother, my father, my hope, all because of him." But she doesn't hate him, she still loves him, even though he doesn't feel the same way anymore. It's hard, but she accepts it. She agrees that even their most light-hearted memories of childhood were tainted by the reputation of their families. She is able to finally let go and move forward, wanting more than anything to have some semblance of normalcy in her life. To achieve this, the two decide to unite the guilds after all, not through marriage, but friendship and respect. Oh yeah, Henry and Marius died along the way, and Jean-Luc just happened to go missing the moment Gambit got back, so good day to be a second sibling. But who sent the rest of the mercenaries? Hint, he's an ominous super being who lives in a lair and calls himself the World Sculptor. Yes, New Sun is behind it all, but he doesn't actually want to kill Remy. Quite the opposite, really. He's been using a mutant named Quiet Bill to look into different timelines and finds that in every other world, Gambit dies in the same way, with a mystical golden spear through his chest. And if that's not bad enough, somehow, this destroys the world. So he's got two options. Either relocate everyone to a different Earth in case this one goes kaboom, or somehow change how Gambit dies. To his credit, he does entertain option 1 first. That's why he wanted the High Evolutionaries terraform her. However, and I'm not kidding here, Doom beats him to it. Remember how he wasn't around earlier? Well, apparently he was stuck on some other Earth or something, and to get back had to merge it with ours, and science mumbo jumbo says that New Sun can't reheat his nachos. So on to plan B, which is still not murder. People always say that New Sun went around killing Gambits, which is fair because it's definitely what it looks like, but it's not strictly true. Though if the mercenaries did get lucky, it wouldn't not solve his problem. But what he's actually doing is trying to get Gambit to embrace the full scope of his biokinetic fission abilities and stop holding back. He's assuming that if he backs him into a corner, he will unlock his full potential in order to save his own skin. However, what he never expected was that Gambit would only take that leap to save someone else, namely Belladonna. And this misconception points to New Sun's fatal flaw. He doesn't know Remy, despite the fact that, surprise, he's Gambit. Or at least some version of him. Whether he's a long-lost twin, a clone, or a variant isn't initially clear, but one thing that is clear is he's incredibly powerful. He is able to charge everything, including the spaces between the spaces. He's 10 times stronger than our Gambit, even without the lobotomy. He's just got far too much experience and far too little morality. But the fun thing about comics is that now we need a break for stuff like a maximum security tie-in, so the room caves in, New Sun gets squished through a portal, and the finale is tabled for another day, which means we have time to see Gambit act as the head of the unified guilds. It's a bit of an adjustment, like he's still got that superhero dog in him, and if Earth is under attack from Ego the Living Planet or something, he's gonna want his people on the front lines, which is sort of the opposite of where thieves and assassins like to be. He uses them to do two main things. First, to figure out what specific comic trope New Sun is, which means looking into his own past. Every record from the vague time period of his birth has been scrubbed from the hospital, but Courier does find something interesting while infiltrating the government. Evidence of something called the Black Womb Project. This was a Black Ops government-funded research project from the mid-20th century that was headed by Amanda Mueller. How is she still alive? Who knows, but it helps explain how she's also Fontenelle's mother. More on that in a bit. The second thing he does is try and resurrect the Old Kingdom. They got this special chest that can only be opened once the guilds are united, but once they do the ceremony, it's empty. Gambit figures out who did it pretty much immediately. It was Etienne's brother Theron and the assassin Grease. They're the only two, besides himself, that could destroy the contents without opening the chest. And he assumes they did it because they hate him, which is almost right. They did, and they do, but they were also acting on orders from Jean-Luc. See, that old nagging feeling about the clan's backward ways never really disappeared. And since he dipped out earlier, he's been talking with everyone from the Antiquary to Doctor Strange to find out what exactly restoring the Old Kingdom involves. What he learns is that there's an ancient king who lives on as pure energy. Just like Mary Purcell theorized, Gambit is uniquely situated to become his host, and can be imbued with this energy through the use of a golden spear. That's what was in the chest, what Jean-Luc ordered destroyed before Gambit even had a chance to use it. Because the prophecies aren't just true, they're literal. The old kingdom would be a new beginning. It would be heaven on earth, and it would allow mankind to join hand in hand, black and white, Jew and Muslim, human and mutant, towards the shining light of the sun by turning them all to ash. This is what Gambit finally comes to understand when he realizes that he's been thinking about New Sun all wrong. That's right, this whole story boils down to wordplay. New Sun is the light that burned away the past. He is the version of Gambit from a world where the prophecy was carried out, the mystical energy entangled with his powers and created an uncontrollable cascade that tumbled one atom to another until all of reality caught fire. The world burned in a matter of hours, and he was the only survivor. Afterwards, he felt so bad that he tried to pull a Superman and spin back time by harnessing kinetic energy temporally instead of spatially. But he couldn't, because that's crazy. It's also the one thing that our Gambits managed to do that he never could. The farthest he gets is falling between worlds. Still pretty neat. He finds himself in 616 and meets our Gambit, who is undeniably different. Not because he's less powerful, but because he grew up in the Thieves Guild. New Sun was raised in his world's version of the Black Womb Project. He was trained to use his powers before they even manifested, and when they did kick in, he incinerated the whole facility. There was no Fagin's Mob for him, no Thieves Guild, no Chocolate Goop, or young wards playing Robin Hood. There was no Etienne, nor Genevieve, nor Morlock Massacre. He has nothing that makes Gambit more than just a sentient pile of energy and a mask. People often say that New Sun is Gambit without the lobotomy, when what he really is Gambit without Remy LeBeau. Sure, he still briefly served on the X-Men. He still eventually met Jean-Luc and learned of the prophecy, but he had no ties to these people or feelings for them, which is why he cannot grasp that this world is not in danger. He cannot fathom that this Remy doesn't want power. And that becomes his undoing as Gambit unloads all that extra energy, all that raw ability, and feeds it straight into him until, like a balloon, he becomes so stuffed that with the slightest outside pressure, he simply pops. But Gambit's fight with New Sun isn't about the lobotomy. It's about nature versus nurture. Which means it's time to get back to something I kept teasing throughout the video. If New Sun and Gambit come from the same place, that means they both come from the Black Womb Project, or more likely, the Black Womb herself. This could explain why Sinister seems to know Gambit's parentage and Fontanelle suggests they have shared history. But at the same time, New Sun doesn't seem to think he's her bio kid, and she couldn't have physically given birth to everyone at the facility. At the end of the day, it's not relevant, because he has Tante Maddie, and Jean-Luc, and the Guild, and the X-Men. And this story shows that not only is that what matters, but it's what makes Gambit strong. So the next time someone tries to tell you that Gambit is secretly way more powerful than we thought, tell them that he's not. Lobotomy or not, he will never be as powerful as New Sun because there's more to his character than being powerful. He's literally too grounded for it. Also, he burned himself back to factory settings. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to see how I made Remy and Bella's childhood chocolate catastrophe, then check out the Patreon, where our first exclusive will be going up soon.